I still remember that fateful moment vividly, the instant when he laid the belt on the table, its sleek leather catching the soft glow of the kitchen lights, and then turned his gaze upon me with that familiar, enigmatic smile. In that heartbeat, I sensed that something fundamental was shifting, something that would forever alter the course of my life. His voice, soft yet imbued with a subtle authority, broke the silence. "Laura, we do this only by the rules. Are you ready to accept them?" Those words, both alluring and intimidating, sent a shiver down my spine. I had no inkling of what awaited me, but inside, emotions swirled in a turbulent mix of trepidation and unexpected excitement. My relationship with my mother had always been fraught with tension and a deep-seated sense of alienation. She was a woman of rigid principles, stern, detached, and utterly consumed by her own ambitions. Her life, meticulously orchestrated and coldly efficient, left little room for genuine warmth. Her marriage to Harrison was not a union born of love, but rather a calculated arrangement of convenience. To her, I was nothing more than an unwelcome blemish, a fragment of her life she considered damaged and unworthy. Growing up under her relentless scrutiny, I often felt that I was merely a byproduct of her unyielding pursuit of perfection, a constant reminder of her failures. Yet, in stark contrast to the cold indifference of my mother, Harrison possessed a charisma that drew people in effortlessly. There was something in the way he looked at me, a subtle kindness behind the imposing exterior, that made me feel seen and valued. His attention was like a beacon in the darkness of my otherwise lonely existence, and I couldn't help but be captivated by the mystery that surrounded him. His presence was magnetic, filling the room with an energy that both comforted and unnerved me. In his eyes, I sensed the promise of a different kind of life, a life where I might finally be more than just a discarded part of someone else's story. That particular evening, with the house unusually quiet in the absence of my mother, who had left on a business trip, the air itself seemed charged with anticipation. The fading light of dusk mingled with the soft hum of the refrigerator, transforming the mundane kitchen into a stage set for something extraordinary. After dinner, as shadows stretched across the worn tiles, he invited me to stay behind. It was as if the entire world had contracted to just the two of us, our shared space suddenly imbued with an intensity that made every second count. As I lingered in that intimate setting, I couldn't help but replay the earlier moments in my mind. The way he had casually placed the belt on the table, the look in his eyes, and the hint of a challenge in his tone. The kitchen, with its modest furnishings and lingering aroma of our meal, became a sanctuary where unspoken desires and secret questions began to surface. I felt the pressure of the moment, as though I were standing on the threshold of a life-changing decision, teetering between the familiar and the unknown. Then, breaking the quietude, he spoke once more, his voice a mixture of playful challenge and profound sincerity. "Laura, do you believe in rules?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent ripples through my soul. I felt as if he were probing the very core of my being, daring me to confront the parts of myself I had long kept hidden. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me, and I replied with a tentative smile, looking at what rules? Even as the words left my lips, I wondered if I was daring to step beyond the bounds of my safe, predictable existence. He stepped closer still, and the gap between us vanished, replaced by a charged intimacy that made every heartbeat echo like a drum. "What about the ones that force you to understand yourself?" he continued, his tone now earnest and heavy with unspoken promise. In that moment, every word resonated within me as if unlocking a part of my soul I had long kept sealed. I felt my heart quicken, my pulse matching the rhythm of a destiny I hadn't dared to imagine. The rules he spoke of were not mere restrictions, but a pathway to discovering who I truly was. A wave of vulnerability washed over me as I realized that this was no ordinary conversation. It was an invitation to dismantle the carefully constructed walls I had built around myself, to face the parts of me I had long suppressed. Despite the uncertainty that gnawed at my courage, a spark of determination flared within me. I had spent too long living in the shadow of others' expectations, and now, with his challenge, there was a chance to rediscover who I could become. The intensity in his eyes promised not just a test, but a transformative journey into the depths of my own identity. As the moments stretched on, every second seemed to pulse with the potential for change. I felt as though I were on the brink of a revelation, a turning point where the old, painful narratives of my life could be rewritten. His challenge was a mirror, reflecting back to me a version of myself that was raw, unfiltered, and aching to be acknowledged. I was both terrified and exhilarated by the prospect of stepping into this new role, of embracing a future where the rules were not shackles, but rather stepping stones towards understanding my true self. In that charged silence, his final words settled over me like both benediction and curse. I knew the journey ahead would be full of unimaginable challenges, yet the promise of discovery was irresistible. As I stood there, heart pounding, I resolved to face whatever came next. Every fiber of my being trembled with fear and hope. We'll see tomorrow. Just be ready. Next morning, I stood before his office door, a place always forbidden to me, but today it was ajar, inviting me in. I stepped inside, and the room was charged with a quiet, deliberate purpose. The office was neat and orderly. On a desk lay carefully arranged stacks of papers, an old leather belt, and a small notebook filled with handwritten notes. Every item seemed chosen to challenge me. "Sit down," he instructed, gesturing to the chair across from him. I obeyed, sliding into the seat as my heart pounded. I sensed this was not merely a continuation of our earlier conversation, but the start of a trial that would test me both mentally and physically. He fixed his gaze on me and said, "First rule, no doubts. If you choose to play, you must accept everything I propose without hesitation." I swallowed. "And what if I don't like it?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He crossed his arms. "Then you may leave, but the game stops forever." His tone left no room for argument, and my pulse quickened at the finality of his words. Taking a deep breath, I met his eyes and replied, "All right, I'm playing." Those words promised a new beginning, a chance to shatter the doubts that had long held me captive. Without further comment, he reached for the belt. Its worn surface, rough yet oddly comforting, spoke of past trials. "This belt," he said, "is more than an object. It symbolizes the boundaries you once believed unbreakable. Today, you will begin to challenge those limits." He then pointed to the notebook. "Open it," he ordered. "Inside you will find your first task." With trembling fingers, I opened the notebook to a single page bearing the instruction, "Write down your deepest doubt." The task was both straightforward and terrifying, forcing me to confront every insecurity that had ever plagued me. He continued softly, "Every doubt and fear that has held you back must be acknowledged. Write it down clearly. Only by facing it can you overcome it." His words filled the silence with undeniable weight. I picked up the pen. After a moment's hesitation, I began writing. Each word was a confession of the hidden parts of me, the constant feeling of inadequacy, and the persistent whisper that I was never enough. Writing became a release, and my inner turmoil poured onto the page. When I finished, I looked up. He studied me with quiet approval. "Very good," he said. "You have taken the first step by confronting what lies within you." Then he leaned forward. "Now, we move to the next phase. This part will test your resolve and your ability to trust, both yourself and me. Doubt may creep in, but each trial is a chance to discover new strength." A soft knock came at the door, and a voice announced, "The next test is ready." My heart raced as I glanced at him. "Do not worry," he said calmly. "This is all part of the process. Follow me." He rose and led me to the door. Outside, the corridor was dimly lit, and each step echoed with uncertainty and determination. The corridor led to a small room, its ambience far different from the office. Inside, subdued lighting and a single chair dominated the space. "Sit here," he instructed. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner and my heartbeat. Once seated, he closed the door, creating a private space. "This test is simple," he said. "Remain here in silence and confront the discomfort of stillness. Your mind may wander, but do not act on your doubts." A chill ran down my spine at his words. The challenge was both mental and physical, a test of inner strength. "How long do I have?" I asked softly. "Until you find your inner calm," he replied. "There is no set time. When you are ready, you will know." His reply offered no comfort, only the certainty that I must rely on myself. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in that quiet space where minutes stretched endlessly. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. At first, the silence was overwhelming, filled with the doubts I had just recorded and the fear of what lay ahead. Gradually, I noticed a subtle shift. The chaos of my thoughts settled into a steady rhythm. I became aware of the cool chair beneath me, the sound of my heartbeat, and the faint smell of old paper. In that silence, a spark of clarity emerged. Just as I felt this calm take hold, the door opened once more. He entered, his expression unreadable. "Well done," he said. "You have confronted your inner turmoil. But remember, this is only the beginning. More tests will come, challenging your resolve in ways you have never imagined." I rose, my legs trembling yet determined. What comes next? I asked, my voice a mix of apprehension and newfound strength. He offered a slight smile. That, Laura, you will discover in time. For now, know that you have passed your first trials. The journey ahead is uncertain, but each step will reveal a new aspect of who you truly are. Trust the process, and trust yourself. Walking back along the corridor, my mind raced with a mixture of anticipation and fear. I recalled every moment that had led me here, the silent struggles, the hidden pain, and the small victories achieved in defiance of my own doubts. The weight of the journey ahead was daunting, yet I felt a subtle power growing within me. Every step became a testament to my willingness to face the unknown and challenge the parts of me that had always whispered of inadequacy. I knew that the tests would push me to my limits and force me to uncover strengths I had never imagined. In that quiet moment, I vowed to embrace every challenge, learn from each failure, and rise each time I fell. The path was uncertain, but it was mine to tread, and I was ready to begin the next chapter of this perilous game. I stepped forward, determined to embrace the unknown. His words echoed as I stepped back into the corridor. My mind buzzed with questions about the challenges ahead, but I clung to the determination that had been sparked within me. The game had just begun, and though fear lingered, I was ready to face whatever came next. Every trial and moment of doubt would be a stepping stone toward the person I was meant to become. Over the next few days, Harrison began inviting me to different places, each new location drawing me further into a realm where the rules of the past no longer applied. It felt as though each encounter was designed to dismantle the carefully built walls around my heart, urging me to trust him and, more importantly, to trust myself. One bright afternoon, he asked me to meet him at a quiet park on the city's edge. The sun filtered through the leaves, and the soft murmur of distant chatter mingled with the rustling of trees. We found a secluded bench far from prying eyes. Without any preamble, he said, "Close your eyes, Laura." I hesitated only a moment before complying, shutting out the world and allowing my ears to capture every subtle sound. "You're overthinking again," Harrison murmured softly. "In this game, it's not about logic, it's about feeling. Let your senses guide you." His tone was both chiding and encouraging. As I sat there, the natural symphony of the park enveloped me. The chirp of birds, the distant bark of a dog, even the gentle whisper of the wind. With my eyes still closed, I began to notice nuances I'd never paid attention to before. When I finally opened my eyes, I caught a glimpse of him watching me, a small, approving smile playing on his lips. In that silent affirmation, I sensed that I was beginning to understand his challenge. A few days later, our next meeting took a surprising turn. Harrison arranged for us to meet at an old cottage on the outskirts of the city, a place that exuded mystery from every corner. The cottage, with its weathered stone walls and creaking wooden floors, was illuminated by the soft glow of candles strategically placed around a dusty room. Mirrors hung at odd angles, each reflecting a fractured version of reality, while an ancient table was strewn with an assortment of keys, their metal surfaces tarnished by time. Once inside, the atmosphere was thick with expectation. Harrison turned to me, his eyes alight with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "Are you ready for the next step?" he asked, his voice both inviting and laced with a hint of challenge. I swallowed, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "It depends on what step you mean," I replied, my voice betraying the nervous energy inside me. "Trust," he answered simply. "This step isn't about following rules. It's about relinquishing control and embracing vulnerability. You've come this far, Laura, and I know there's more inside you waiting to be discovered." His words, enigmatic and firm, resonated deeply. They made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. He moved to the table and picked up one of the keys. Its surface was rough, bearing the scars of years of use. "This key," he began, "symbolizes the unlocking of the parts of you that you've kept hidden. It isn't just a key for a door. It's a key to the door within yourself that you have yet to open." I reached out tentatively and let my fingertips graze the cool metal. In that brief contact, I felt as if I were touching not just an object, but a fragment of my own potential. Before I could voice my doubts, Harrison continued, "The key is a symbol, Laura. The real challenge is to trust that you have the strength to face what lies behind that door. In this game, your vulnerabilities are not weaknesses. They are the raw materials of transformation." I took a deep breath and looked into his eyes, searching for some hint of assurance. "I'm trying to understand," I admitted quietly. "It feels like every step takes me further away from who I thought I was." A gentle smile curved his lips as he stepped closer. "Sometimes," he said, To truly know yourself, you must venture into the unfamiliar. This game is personal. It's about rediscovering the parts of you that have been buried by fear and expectation. Today, you're not just playing by my rules. You're embracing a journey of self-revelation. For a moment, we stood in silence, the only sound the soft flickering of the candles. Then, as if on cue, the lighting in the room dimmed further. The mirrors began to catch the light in strange, fragmented ways, and I could see not just my own reflection but fleeting images of memories long forgotten. The timid girl I once was, the moments when fear dictated every decision. The experience was both disorienting and profoundly moving. "Look into the mirror," Harrison instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. "See not the reflection shaped by the world, but the truth beneath it." I stepped forward and peered into one of the mirrors. The glass, slightly misted, offered a view that was more than my physical appearance. It revealed hints of past pains, lost dreams, and a potential for strength I had never dared to imagine. My throat tightened as I took in the conflicting images, each one a fragment of the person I had been and the person I might yet become. "Do you see it?" Harrison asked, coming up beside me. "The layers you've built up are starting to fall away." I nodded, unable to find the words to describe the tumult of emotions swirling inside me. "It's overwhelming," I finally whispered. "I never thought I'd have to face myself like this." He rested a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "Every challenge in this game is designed to confront you with your own truth. You're not alone in this journey, Laura. Trust the process, and trust your own resilience." His touch was both comforting and electrifying, reminding me that vulnerability could also be a source of strength. As the evening progressed, Harrison and I remained in the cottage, our conversation ebbing and flowing between silence and soft exchanges. "You've done well today," he remarked at one point, his tone thoughtful. "Remember, this journey doesn't have a defined end. Every trial will reveal a new piece of who you are. The game is becoming more personal, and the stakes will only get higher." I met his gaze, feeling a newfound determination mingled with lingering uncertainty. "I understand," I replied, my voice firm yet gentle. "I'm ready to face whatever comes next." In that moment, the room seemed to pulse with possibility, a promise that each test, however challenging, was a step toward embracing the person I was meant to become. Leaving the cottage that night, the cool air outside was a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere within. I walked slowly along the deserted street, my mind reeling from the evening's revelations. Every sound, every flicker of light, seemed imbued with meaning. Harrison's words echoed in my thoughts. The journey was as much about breaking down old barriers as it was about discovering new strengths. That night, as I lay awake in my room, I replayed the images of the cottage, the soft glow of the candles, the fractured reflections in the mirrors, and the feeling of that cool key in my hand. I realized that each new experience was chipping away at the doubts that had long defined me. With every step, the game was not just a series of tests, it was a deeply personal exploration of my own identity. A silent vow formed in my heart. No matter how daunting the path ahead, I would trust the process. I would trust Harrison's guidance and, above all, trust that I possessed the inner strength to transform. Though the challenges promised to become more intimate and perhaps even more painful, I knew that this journey was leading me to a place of true self-discovery, a place where every moment of vulnerability could be the seed of something powerful. As I drifted into sleep, the night whispered of the unknown adventures still to come. The game was growing more personal, and I had no choice but to follow its call, step by step, until the hidden doors within me were finally unlocked. The next day, Harrison surprised me by suggesting a drive out of the city. I agreed without hesitation, feeling that each step on this journey was steering me toward a necessary revelation. We drove in silence, the cityscape gradually giving way to open fields and a calm, expansive horizon. Soon enough, we arrived at an old, abandoned barn, a structure that, despite its neglect, exuded a mysterious allure. The barn's weathered wood and faded paint hinted at long-forgotten stories, and inside, the space was nearly empty. Faint light streamed through broken windows, casting eerie patterns on the dusty floor. In the center of the room stood a single wooden chair. Harrison walked straight to it, his gaze unwavering as he said, "Sit." I approached the chair and lowered myself onto it, feeling the rough wood under my palms and my heart quickening with anticipation. "This is part of your trial," Harrison declared firmly. "Forget everything else for now. Open up about your deepest thoughts and fears." His tone brooked no argument, and I understood that I was to bare my soul. Without pause, he began his questioning. "What is your greatest fear?" he asked, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that left me momentarily speechless. After a brief hesitation, I whispered, I fear being forgotten, being invisible in a world that never truly sees me. The confession, though painful, felt liberating. Harrison nodded slowly and pressed on. And what do you desire more than anything? I drew in a steadying breath and replied, I long to be understood, to live without the chains of fear that have always held me back. Each word peeled away a layer of my defenses, leaving me vulnerable yet strangely empowered. As he continued, the atmosphere in the barn grew charged with tension. Do you feel the barriers within you beginning to crumble? He asked softly. I closed my eyes for a moment, focusing on the rhythm of my heartbeat, and answered, yes, I feel them dissolving with every truth I share. His relentless inquiries forced me to confront long-hidden parts of myself, and with every admission, I sensed my inner strength emerging. Harrison's method was direct and unyielding, yet his questions carried an undercurrent of care. Each one nudged me closer to the edge of my comfort zone, stripping away years of built-up reservations. The more I revealed, the more I found that my vulnerability was not a weakness, but a source of profound liberation. I felt a rush of exhilaration as the weight of my past dissolved in the stark honesty of that moment. In the solitude of the abandoned barn, far removed from the expectations of my former life, I experienced a transformation. The trial was no longer just a game, it became a powerful moment of rebirth. The intense conversation left me emotionally exposed, yet also fortified with a newfound strength. I was no longer defined by my fears, but was beginning to embrace my true self. For those few charged minutes, I forgot everything else, the noise of the world, the burdens of my past. I was entirely immersed in this new reality, a space where only raw truth existed. In that profound silence, I realized that Harrison had created a world where every barrier vanished, and I could finally be completely free. The evening felt like the finale of everything we had begun. Harrison led me to his bedroom, declaring that our game would end there. The atmosphere was charged with tension yet strangely mesmerizing, the only light coming from a single lamp on the bedside table. Its soft glow accentuated the shadows, lending an almost surreal quality to the room. Standing before me, Harrison fixed his intense gaze on my eyes. Laura, do you understand that now everything depends solely on you? He asked, his voice quiet yet resolute. I nodded silently, feeling an overwhelming desire surge within me. A desire that screamed I wanted this more than anything, even though deep down I knew it was wrong. Without breaking eye contact, he stepped closer. His hand gently brushed against my shoulder, and in that touch, I felt a warmth that promised a departure from all my past inhibitions. For a fleeting moment, the barriers between us seemed to dissolve, and I was ready to embrace the vulnerability of this new world he was creating. Then, abruptly, the sound of a door opening shattered the fragile spell. Laura, are you here? My mother's voice called out. In an instant, the magic of the moment broke into fragments. I recoiled, my heart pounding in a mix of shock and dread, while Harrison remained unerringly composed. The door swung open, and there she stood. My mother's eyes, sharp and suspicious, swept across the room. What is going on here? She demanded, her tone cold yet laced with an undercurrent of concern. I stood frozen, my mind whirling, unable to form a single word as reality crashed down upon our clandestine encounter. Harrison responded calmly, his voice measured. We were just talking. His words, precise and unwavering, did little to dispel the tension. My mother's gaze lingered on me, and for the first time, I detected something unexpected, a mixture of disappointment and pain reflected in her eyes, as if she finally saw the truth behind the facade I had maintained for so long. After a moment that stretched interminably, my mother turned and left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Left alone with Harrison, the room's charged atmosphere returned, now tainted by the intrusion of reality. Harrison's eyes met mine again, and in a low, steady tone he asked, Now do you understand that our game was never meant to end? His question cut through me like a knife. In that instant, I realized the truth. It had never been solely about us. I had used him as a tool, a means to hurt my mother, driven by a long-held resentment for her cold indifference. Yet now, faced with the consequences of that manipulation, I understood that my quest for revenge had only rendered me more fragile. My mother, with all her imperfections, was human. My bitterness had blinded me to that fact and weakened my own soul. In that dimly lit room, with every piece of our hidden truth laid bare, I felt the weight of the lesson that this game had imposed on me. I was left exposed, raw, and irrevocably changed by the shattering moment when everything unraveled.